A History of Southern Missouri and Northern Arkansas by William Monks, published in 1907. Colonel Monks, commissioned by the Governor, Part 2, number 49. On reaching Frederick's Fork Township, Captain Alley made a speech to the people and said, among other things, that the counties of Oregon and Shannon had been controlled by one of the most desperate class of men that ever lived, that they had ridden through the country on horseback, heavily armed, defying the enforcement of the civil law, intimidating the people, both Federal and Confederate alike, and committing all manner of crimes, robbing and murdering the people, and boasting openly that the damned Confederacy was whipped, but that they were not, and intended to live off the damned feds. Now the war is over, and all good citizens, be they Federal or Confederate, should be in favor of the enforcement of the civil law. I am ordered by the governor of the state to enroll all able-bodied men in the county to form a posse to aid the sheriff in enforcing the law in Oregon County. I am to organize companies to enforce the civil law. These bushwhackers and thieves have terrorized this county long enough. The governor has sent Captain Monks, a man who is not afraid of bushwhackers and thieves, into this county to arrest these bushwhackers, thieves, and murderers, and bring them to justice. If the people of this county want the civil law enforced, they should aid Captain Monks and his men to hunt these fellows down and either arrest them or drive them from the county. Our people have been present and saw these men commit all manner of crimes, from murder down to the smallest crime known to the criminal code. They have done this openly, and the people were afraid to open their mouths or say a word against it on penalty of death. I wrote the governor stating the condition of affairs in this county, that neither person nor property were safe, and to send Captain Monks to this county. And he has sent him, and we have got the right man in the right place. One of the prominent men of Oregon County went to Jefferson City to see the governor to procure the removal of the writer and have Colonel A.J. C. appointed in his place. He said to the governor that Captain Monks was arresting some of the best men in Oregon County and had them prisoners. The governor showed him some of Captain Alley's letters that he had written to the governor. The letter stated, among other things, that persons and property were at the mercy of these desperadoes, and the county was being terrorized by James Jameson and his men, that they were robbing whom they pleased openly, that a day or two before he, Alley, wrote the letter, that Jameson shot a man's brains out in Thomasville, and dared any man to say he was in favor of the enforcement of the civil law, that he would serve him the same way. The governor asked him if those things were true, and he replied that they were. The governor said to him, "You are a leading man in that county and a citizen of Thomasville, and never a word have you written to me that such terror and lawlessness existed in your county." He replied, "Governor, I was afraid to." The governor replied to him, "When I send a man down there that is not afraid to handle those men without gloves, then here you come with a howl. Now, I expected when I sent Captain Monks down there, if he did his duty, that there would be a howl raised. I am satisfied that he is doing his duty. I am responsible for his acts, and you men want to get rid of him. Go home and tell your people to organize companies under Captain Alley and aid Captain Monks and his men in arresting and driving those bushwhackers and bandits out of your county, and whenever Captain Monks reports to me that the person and property of your citizens are secure, and that the civil law is being enforced, he will be removed, and not before." They then employed Colonel A.J. C. as an attorney. Sometime during the night, while we were encamped on Frederick's Fork, some of the soldiers took the sheriff out and put a rope around his neck to make him tell where the bones of 2 soldiers were who were murdered by Jameson and his men. He admitted that he knew where the bones of the 2 Federal soldiers were, that after they shot them, Jameson gave him the mule and saddle that one man was riding, that he was afraid not to take them, and promised as soon as the command reached Thomasville to go ashore the bones. On the next morning after our arrival at Thomasville, I procured a big box and placed it in a wagon and brought the sheriff from the guardhouse and set him on the box under a strong guard. About that time, Colonel A.J.C. came up and asked what we were going to do with that man. I told him, that is my business. When you was in the military service, did you inform the civilians of your object and aims? You are a civilian now, and I will give you 5 minutes to get outside of the lines, or you will go into the guardhouse. He took me at my word and left at once. The sheriff piloted the scout to the bones of the men that had been murdered, and the sheriff, aided by the scout, picked up the bones and placed them in the box. On examination, it was found that 3 bullets had passed through one of the skulls, and the other skull appeared to have been shot all to pieces. I brought the bones in and caused them to be buried in a cemetery about 1 mile west of Thomasville. Captain Alley had completed the organization of 2 companies, one commanded by Captain Lasley and the other by Captain Bledsaw. The companies were mostly composed of men who had been late Confederates, as there were very few Union men in the county. They immediately fell in with my soldiers, and a vigorous search was at once made for Jameson and his men. Being aided by men who were thoroughly acquainted with the county and knew just where to look for Jameson and his cutthroats, they agreed to keep on Jameson's track and arrest him and his men if possible in Oregon County. I moved my troops up into Shannon County to prevent Jameson and his men from crossing over into Shannon, and scouted that county to keep them from hiding there. The Oregon County Company shot and killed some of them and arrested others. Jameson and the others left the county and never have returned to it since. But they left some of their sympathizers in the county, and the only weapons left them were their tongues. Having no conscience or principle, and instigated by the wicked one, they began lying and preferring all manner of charges against the writer and his men who went into the county, and by the aid of the law-abiding citizens, drove out and arrested one of the worst set of men that ever lived, the savage not excepted, and restored the civil law so that every citizen was secure in person and property. The writer informed the governor that a large majority of the citizens, both Confederate and Federal, had nobly responded to his call, had organized 2 companies of militia to aid the sheriff in the enforcement of the civil law. Jameson and his bushwhackers had either been arrested, killed, or driven from the county, and the strong arm of the military law was not needed any longer. On December 25, 1867, the writer was ordered by the governor to withdraw his forces from the counties that had been placed under martial law and declare the civil law to be in full force and effect. I accordingly returned to Howell County and disbanded my soldiers. During my march and stay in the counties of Oregon and Shannon, it was admitted by all honorable Confederates that I had enforced a strict discipline over my men and protected all classes of citizens in person and property, had paid the people for all forage and commissaries that were required for the soldiers, and had driven out the worst set of bushwhackers, thieves, and murderers that ever lived.